would you like to say?
Hi, and firstly, thank you to Rachel and yourself for bringing this issue a little bit more
I didn't do anything.
to light. I'd actually like to touch on the next stage after you realise that you have failed this certification, which is what we have come up to. We live in a 17 floor block with less than 50% of our, we call it, instead of cladding, the external wall system panelling, because it's actually the entire wall, contains a very small amount of combustible material. And so we have failed on the basis that they cannot test whether it will pass or not. And the reason for that is you have to get a BR 135 test, which costs anywhere between £50,000 and £100,000 for the residents, and is on between a 5 and 8 month lead time, where someone will construct an example of your wall in a factory and burn it down. But if we went for that test, we would miss the deadline for the cladding application fund from the government, which ends in December. So we've had to essentially self-fail because the fire engineer cannot tell us whether we will pass or not. When you self-fail...
Forgive me, would it help if the government extended the scheme beyond December?
Well, absolutely, but then you have to...
Because I'm just looking for things we can agitate for or things we can campaign for.
The problem is, though, is the cost. So you spend $50,000, $100,000 doing that. As soon as the report hits your table that says that you have not got this certification, we are required to implement this Waking Watch, which is at a cost of nearly £40,000 a month for 100 residents. Not only that, our insurance is expected to go up tenfold to £1 million this year, which is, as you can imagine,
can you put? I'm sure you can.
An impossible cost.
I hesitate to ask if you. I mean, what are we talking for you personally as a ballpark figure on what you're looking at right now?
We expect to have nearly £40,000 a year in service charge this year alone. So the next step is what irrespective of the Waking Watch, which is a totally useless mechanism for detecting fire, which we've had our own designed over the last weekend as a more effective situation, and irrespective of the insurance companies putting up insurance by 10 times. Our block is constructed in a way which contains what's called a curtain wall cladding system. So each piece is made somewhere else and then lifted into place with a crane and attached to the inside of the concrete load bears. In order to take out this less than 50% of combustible materials, this one type of insulation in our block, we are going to have to strip the entire building back to its original concrete load-bearing walls, which is an uninhabitable position for every resident in here. We will have to destroy every floor in every flat, every wall, every inside wall, every window, take off every balcony in order to get this out, on the basis that we don't know whether this building will pass or fail the test or not, because we can't get it, because we can't afford a test, and we'll miss the application for the funding, which will... I
honestly think
leave us bankrupt.
No, well, of course, I'm surprised you're still afloat at all, to be honest with you. Who do you, forgive me for this question, and by all means decline to answer it, but who do you blame?
It's not really an allocation of blame.
No.
It's more an allocation of a hip-jerk reaction for an issue which is extremely important, but you cannot filter down the problems to the structure of leaseholding, which means you leave it to the base leaseholder. It's certainly not the freeholder's problem. To be clear, this is not a freeholder issue. It's not an original contractor problem, because I have the certificates of my building in my drawer. They passed every building control test process that exists. The building is very well constructed. It's a total lack of clarity and covering ourselves, and an insurance problem. In everything we do, in any type of construction, in walking down the street, in buying a property, you take an allocation of risk.
You do.
We are living in an apartment block in the centre of London.
Yes.
If you are putting down that these guidelines, there is really no legal basis to what is being recommended, other than the person who makes a decision as a resident is criminally liable if you ignore them and the building burns down.
Why do you know so much? Because you've had to go on a crash course as a result of finding yourself in this predicament, or is it your work as well?
No, we're just, so this is, I'm purely a resident of our block.
So it's the crash course.
I put myself forward with a number of others late last year to become a member of the resident committee in order to paint the inside of the block. And so now we have been deemed under the fire regulatory order as the responsible person for the lives of everybody in this block on the crash course of this is what happens. Because it's the stress. It's a full-time job on top of a normal job, a voluntary, as a normal resident, dealing with the same stresses as your finances and the capability that this block may not exist next year, because we may have to abandon it if we cannot
and how much,
do the measures.
Yeah, how much would you be in the hole for?
It depends which stage. I mean, we're trying to enforce a voluntary waking watch, which will cut costs. We can't afford the insurance currently. If we didn't get the first come, first served cladding grant, which is only for £1 billion anyway, it's estimated about 25 billion is needed to resolve this across the UK. Wow. If we don't get the application for that funding, our external costs are anywhere between 4 and 8 million to replace the outside of our building. So we will just walk away. Everybody will walk away.
I don't
there are
believe
residents
this.
already in this block who have lost their job because of COVID, who have families, who have already been, in our little group meetings in our lobby, saying that they might as well give the keys to the bank. Well, the bank doesn't want the keys because the flat is worthless.
And will they still? And they'll still be liable for the debt to the bank, even if they can't.
Well, exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
This is appalling.
So this system needs more structure. It's not a blame thing. It needs stepping in. Insurance companies cannot increase the insurance by 10 times. It needs to be underwritten by the government.
No, of course.
And
the extension to the application for the grants needs to be.
Extension application to the grant. You need Waking Watch doesn't work. If you need an alarm system, there should be public-private bodies who can fit an alarm within a set period of time for a reasonable cost. You cannot just implement hip-jerk reactions, and then every stage of the process, from insurance to fire engineers to assessors to consultants to original contractors, covering themselves in every way. You cannot leave it on the lower.
Well, have you been in touch with Rachel Venables yet?
I sent her an email. Yeah, I'm hoping she'll get back in contact.
Well, I shall encourage her to move that email up to the top of her to-do list, because this is. I can't remember the last time this happened on the radio. It's all as a result of Rachel's work. But this is just unbelievable.